my old friend. Yeah, he got 20 kills and slums.
MVP and kill cam.
MVP and kill cam.
With only melee.
With only melee. Well, I'm losing my voice.
Charlie, it sounds like you're dying.
I am dying.
On the inside.
Into the unknown.
I may or may not only have the crowbar left, and I may or may not only 4 kills with it with a flashbang person. I may or may not have every other melee weapon in the game.
Yeah, is that why you called?
No, it's really the one to play with you.
No.
And get Jeremiah out of the gutter.
Green.
Oh my god, can I just say something right quick?
Who? He's there, right there. Someone else get up.
Oh my god. Bro, the guy's head gets squished in the kill cam. No, he loses his fucking head.
It's a dynamo.
Stand still. You're mine, traitor. Feel the pain.
Help me, BD.
We'll root you all out. Finish this.
Right here, BD.
Scared. Quit. I will get through. Finish the job.
BD, help please. Nice work.
Intruder there! On him, now! Get him already!
What's this? Yes. Let's take a look.
Hello? Hello? Yeah, I can hear you. Fallen order?
These Wookiees are useless. If they're worn out, we'll need to request new ones. That means requisition forms. What a hassle.
What you say? Bro, I can barely hear you, bro. Yeah.
This Wookiee died from toxic fumes. The Empire is poisoning the planet.
Yeah.
Bro.
Yeah.
Why can't you get an invite to the bar?
Cause I'm streaming Fallen Order.
Yeah, but you see me rock.
Yeah, I sent all my friends one.
You saw that too, right?
Let's check it out. Yeah? Let me see.
You're not stealthy. Stop dodging all you're good at? Better than I thought. got an intruder here. I got it.
Usually when things get way more unpleasant, you can't just parkour away from zombies anymore. You've got to face them head on now, and you've got to do it in cramped, congested, and often disorienting environments. It can get really rough is what we're saying. And one of the all-time creepiest is this apartment building you go to in the mission Public Faces. As usual with this game, the goal here is pretty straightforward, but actually pulling it off is anything but. Basically, in the story, you find out that the government has given up on Haran, this city this game takes place in, and is telling the world that there aren't any survivors left as an excuse to just carpet bomb the whole place off the map, Raccoon City style. So your dude and the remaining survivors came up with a plan to signal the outside world by setting off explosives in this apartment building, blowing a giant symbol into the side of it. The problem is, and no surprise here, that the place is swarming with zombies, of course. If all that isn't bad enough, what makes this mission really stand out in the players' minds are these creepy as hell zombie variants. They're screamers. They're literally zombie children, which is about as messed up as it gets. To make matters worse, these things don't even try to fight you. Instead, they just scream when they detect you, which blurs your vision, does continuous damage to you, and draws the attention of any other zombie within earshot. If you get caught by these things, then they will mess you up, and it's nerve-wracking to deal with them. On top of the whole, zombie kid thing. They're just all around unpleasant to deal with. Even performing a takedown on them is really unnerving. Instead of just killing it, your guy gets get them to calm down before apparently snapping their neck. It's messed up and creepy. This isn't the only mission with these things, but it's the one people are most likely to experience being a main mission. The whole place was already creepy enough, but throwing in screamers just took things to the next level. For some people, this is the creepiest mission in the game. It's that bad. Next over at number 6, going from the urban sprawl of Dying Light to the decaying countryside of the following expansion, this side quest is one of those things that sounds about as simple as it gets when you get it, but of course, the whole thing leads to an absolute nightmare. Your goal here is to find out what happened to the herb supplier. Simple enough. So you go on out to his hut up in the mountains. The place looks abandoned, but otherwise okay. But if you head around the back and look inside, that's where things start to get creepy and nasty. There's a big hole in the middle of the room, which is never a good thing. Anytime a game forces you to go down a hole, you just know that nothing good is going to be down there. If and when you finally take the plunge down there, then you'll find yourself in a short tunnel that leads to a blood-soaked cave. This place is just disgusting. There's gore-filled pools, thousands of buzzing flies, and a sickly orange glow to everything. This is where you find the guy you were sent to find. He's a volatile and one of the nastiest creatures in Dying Light. Once you put him out of his misery, you've cleared the nest. Little locations like this have the possibility of leaving a big impression on players. The way that developers put a creepy twist on seemingly a mundane task, this one really stuck in players' minds and is considered a really scary mission. Next over at number 5, some of the most nerve-wracking sequences in Dying Light are totally optional, like the quarantine zones. There are a couple of these unique locations dotted around the map that are areas that contain a ton of useful supplies, but are swarming with the undead and generally really dangerous. If you want a chance of surviving these places, you're going to need to be stocked up on weapons and ammo because they can be pretty unforgiving when they want to be. One of the absolute creepiest quarantines in this game is found in Old Town at this huge apartment building. You know it's not going to be a good thing going in here. The entire building is tented off, cluing you in that this place is going to be filled with infected and dark as hell. And yeah, it is. To make matters worse, this place has virals, aka the runner zombies, and at least one screamer as well. It's got a lot of enemies, but just exploring this place is scary. The layout is really confusing and disorienting, and because it's so dense, you'll pretty much be hearing every enemy in the place at all times. And because of that, enemies can easily sneak up on you at times and attack when you don't realize it, giving you a good jump scare. But what makes this place really memorable is the piano music that plays throughout. A radio all the way up on the 3rd floor is playing Chopin's Nocturne No. 20, a haunting piece that really only adds another layer of dread to the whole atmosphere of this place. Classical music always works. Besides the music, there's not really a lot of gimmicks here or twists on the formula. The place is just oppressive, difficult, and a creepy location. if you manage to not get distracted by the other Easter egg found in the same room. Going in snow, touch it a few times, and then something weird starts to happen. The ground's found. If you open up this boarded up door, you can look inside the bathroom and see the corpse of a woman who presumably killed herself in the bathtub. Death is a common sight in the world of Dying Light, but the way this whole scene is framed makes it really spooky and more chill.
Captain America reporting for duty.
But between worlds as well.
Download now.
The one that isn't just naturally second area of the game, Old Town. Well, it's not the most difficult. Being more... A zombie will spring to life beside you, and the doors will suddenly start to shake like something's banging on the other side. Keep going. Calls from this place called the Fans, which was built as a part of the... You right there, but you can escape through the open top of the elevator and sneak through a vent. He still shoots at you and continues to rant, but once you get... I am considering, he's like more of a mission. Time can get your heart pounding. The mission tasks you with collecting an airdrop of vital supplies for the people of the town.
A cataract, and his eyesight suffered. Soon after, Barber's eyesight is restored to him, and Rob is astonished.
You're back with sports news. Last night saw a huge upset with some hot new talent on the field. Now, Ronan has dominated the leaderboards for 3 years,
but it looks like he's finally got some competition. Former teammate Lancer has exploded onto the scene.
And he's got Team Ronan in his sights. They're out for blood tonight, and the gloves are coming off. Team Ronan coming hard out the gate. Brickhouse shields up, but here's Zephyr rushing for the kill. Lancer's in trouble. And he's... Oh my God! What is he doing? And Ronan's down, but Lancer's overextended. Oh, it's game over for Lancer, but... Wait! Who is this guy?
New Mech Arena champions, Team Lancer.
Wait, I can directly summon it? Hold on. Alright, so let me explain the game. So Idol Angels is an idol RPG game. That means like you can passively, I mean, that's pretty popular right now on the market, but you can passively gain like experience, gain gold, gain resources. Wait, did I only get, I want to summon 10. Let's just summon it all. We got a gold. We got a gold shiny. Alright, her angle is very, in your face. Nice. Oh, she is SR. Oh no, she's SR. She's SR. I see. Yeah, this one's... Yeah, you can click her too. Holy crap. Yeah, gravity deek.
By how much the Jewish physician knows. The physician tells him that he studied with Ibn Sina, a genuine Persian doctor. Rob decides on a journey to the Middle East because he wants to study medicine with Ibn. Barber tries to dissuade Rob, but when he realizes Rob's determination, I doubt Rob endures the pain of circumcision. A teenage girl is found alive. Although the caravan does not want to burden themselves with the girl's presence, Rebecca takes the girl with her. As night draws, the young girl falls sick and gets feverish. Rob tries to heal her with all his knowledge, while taken by a sandstorm. Rob survives the disaster, but he cannot find Rebecca. Without any water or food, other survivors have collapsed one after another. Rob alone continues walking in the desert by the skin of his teeth. Just when Rob is too exhausted to move on, he sees the city from afar and perseveres. In the end, Rob arrives in Isfahan, a civilized city that boasts many advanced developments in various sectors. Ibn runs a large hospital dedicated in equal measure to treating the sick and teaching students. Without further wait, wants to drink his way out of sadness and even calls a prostitute up for service. The prostitute will lose her life today without any treatment. So Ibn takes this chance to recommend Rob to the royals. During their first meet, Rob can tell King is a cruel man, but he does not fear him. King has broken his wrist while killing the Seljuk messenger. Little does he know that the messenger turns out to be the son of the Seljuk leader. To avenge, the enemy has thrown in a man with Black Death disease to Isfahan to deliberately infect the whole city. The man dies an abnormal death, and Ibn is soon informed of it. Based on his past experiences, Ibn predicts that an epidemic is imminent and inevitable. The king does not trust his judgment. Rob scans through the medical records and concludes that the outbreak will come in the next 12 hours. They set up temporary medical help stations, getting ready for the heavy flow of patients. People are leaving the city by all means. To Rob's shock, King has declared that only the nobles are the virus and struggles with high fever. She submerges herself in water to cool down the body temperature. Rob then brings Rebecca back to the hospital and nurses her back to health. Meanwhile, Rob suggests dissecting a corpse. The epidemic is over, the nobles return to their home, and self-quarantine facilities are torn down. When everyone is happy that they have overcome the plague, Rob finds one of his friends contracted with the virus and is dying soon. The virus. He praises Rob for bravely giving him medical advice and befriends him. However, Rob cannot get so Rob hides his body and over the next several weeks gradually dissects the corpse and draws what he sees. Now that Rob gains an understanding of the human body structure, he cannot help to attack the medical school to wipe out the Jews who are thought to blaspheme their God. Mullah staged protests in the city. Although the king put down the uprising by force, the mullahs found allies in the Seljuk in an attempt to exposes his secret work. The captors find the dissected corpse and drag Rob and Ibn in front of the mullah. Do not buy his smelly shit. That night before the execution, Ibn and Rob have an in-depth talk in prison. Ibn is curious about Rob's dissection and asks him about it, so the two have a discussion on the forbidden topic. When King learns about the charges against Rob and Ibn, he summons the leader of mullahs and orders him to release the two doctors. Outside the palace, the mullahs have launched an attack against the Jews. Unarmed, Jews have no choice but shut themselves in their own house, hoping the disaster would pass over them. The surgery proves successful, and Rob has finally fulfilled his wish of having the skills to save his mom. Only as soon as the drug is over, King puts on his amour to go. Mullahs wielding butcher knives to cause troubles in Isfahan. Rob flees the city, but he soon realizes Ibn is missing. So Rob frantically searches for Ibn and finds him in the library staring at the burning books. Ibn tells Rob that he has taken poison. He gives Rob a book of medical writing and then readies himself for death as Rob leaves. Shortly after, Rob and Rebecca flee Isfahan together with Ibn's book. Soon after, Isfahan falls as King dies and boy to lead the way. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel.
Mortality and the merc with a mouth fell in love, settled down, and created a life together. Now that question isn't as absurd as you might think. Death and Deadpool's romance is a long-running affair. It
makes sense, really. Death can't have Deadpool because Deadpool can't die. And as the lyric goes, you want what you can't have. Through that love and a pinch of cosmic magic, this alternate universe version of Death's essence is reborn. The result? The daughter of Death and Deadpool. Deathpool, naturally. A doting father, Deadpool taught his daughter everything he knew about how to wield a blade, crack a quip, and even how to be the personification of a fundamental force in the universe. Her training complete, Deathpool traveled the cosmos doing the job of death and being extremely rad, visiting her father occasionally to do laundry. That was until Thanos entered the picture. The mad titan of this universe was infuriated by Death's absence. After suffering a rare defeat, Deathpool watched as her family was snapped into dust. This reality's Thanos had gathered the Infinity Gems solely as a way to destroy Deadpool. But he wasn't satisfied with only one. Unwilling to accept defeat, Deathpool chases this Thanos through the multiverse on a quest for vengeance. A journey that would eventually lead her to the Nexus and to Marvel's Strike Force. Next up, how Deathpool fights and where she fits into your roster. But first, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. Be cool, like Deathpool. Like her father, Deathpool is both a hero and a brawler with traits to match. Thanks to her mother, she also has the mystic and cosmic traits. She's also the first member of the New Warriors to join the game. Deathpool brings a combination of firepower, healing, and negative effect control to her team. Her attacks can clear Deathproof, play havoc with debuffs, and even heal herself and mystic allies. Of special note is her ultimate, which is a devastating single-target attack that applies bleed. But it charges up over time and transforms into an unblockable, unavoidable, piercing attack for a ludicrous 20,000% damage. That's more than enough to knock him dead with one punch. Deathpool works well with other mystic characters and the New Warriors, but her hero, brawler, and cosmic traits may lend some players to exploring other teams that utilize powerful members of their roster. For ISO 8 classes, her high damage makes Striker a satisfying option, while her high health and healing can make good use of Healer. So, what if Death and Deathpool had a daughter? In celebration of Deadpool's nerdy 30, we're happy to answer that. Deathpool is all of the cosmic power of her mother, raised under the guidance of her wisecracking, sword-swinging father. Is she the best of both worlds? Well, better add her to your roster of superheroes and villains to find out for yourself in Marvel's Strike Force. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, share it with your fellow fans of Marvel Strike Force, and let us know what is the artificial offspring of Elysius, a Titan Eternal, and Marvel, a Kree. She's challenged Annihilus, fought alongside the Guardians of the Galaxy, and even served as the Avatar of Oblivion in a bid to free her lover Moondragon from the Dragon of the Moon. Up to protect her team. In addition to being a hero, she's the first member of the all-new Infinity Watch team, and her other traits include Cosmic, Bio, and Protector. Phyla-Vel's passive ability is Avatar of Oblivion, and it grants her and Infinity Watch allies additional damage. She also starts combat by applying defensive. Afflicted with ability block, she reduces the enemy's chance to critical hit. Phyla-Vel's basic ability. Additionally, if Moondragon is an ally, her presence makes this attack uncounterable. With her special attack, Quantum Cut, it's a standout choice for many situations to keep her in the fight. However, as each of her activated abilities is an attack, more aggressive players may want to experiment with Striker.
John Michelle. They're all gonna get their ass whooped either way.
Bullseye.
It's a dirty game already.
During the interwar period, the Soviet Union has been conducting bomb tests. So they stockpile a huge. Edward is no match at all. He is thrown out of the window and falls to it. Dr. Manhattan. In 1977, void exposure. With few clues, he leaves the crime scene. He's safe. Night Owl 2 doesn't believe him and tries to persuade him to let go of the past and have a normal life. In his thoughts. No matter how hard the situation is, Rorschach will not give up to evil forces. The Superman Ozymandias creates his own company after retirement. He is now a business giant in energy recycling. Feels a sense of loss, being ignored so many times. The next day, the U.S. government comedian and remember his past. When he was young, he was a playboy. Because of his bad temper, not many people liked him. Long ago, the comedian's home, only to be told that the comedian visited Moloch one. Like to know what on earth the comedian had gone through, that upsets him so much. One hormone reaction. She can't feel his love anymore. What's more, no matter what they are doing, there is always a clone of Dr. Manhattan working. Manhattan is being interviewed. At first, the reporters ask questions about the doomsday clock and the government's policy. Later, somebody asks if Dr. Manhattan would cause cancer to people close to him, because some of the people staying close to have cancer. The reporter then introduces Dr. Manhattan's ex-girlfriend onto the scene. Seeing her, all the reporters surge forward. Dr. Manhattan can't stand this anymore, so he escapes to Mars, hoping to find some peace. He stays alone on Mars and remembers the sweet past with his ex. They met in 1959. At that time, they had a similar job and lived happily. One day, finishing work, a funeral for him. Not long after, a miracle happens. Dr. Manhattan comes back to life with superpowers. The U.S. government then makes him into a killing machine. Having this strong yet frightening power over life and death, Dr. Manhattan is seen as a god. However, his ex-girlfriend gradually becomes scared of him. Their relationship lasts until 1970, when Dr. Manhattan meets Silk Spectre 2 and falls in love with her. After Dr. Manhattan leaves Earth, the Soviets use it as an advantage to invade Afghanistan. Now it is only 2 minutes. The next day, Ozymandias survives an assassination attempt, while the killer kills himself by breaking poison in his mouth when captured. At this point, Ozymandias finally understands that Rorschach's suspicions might be correct, so he warns the others to be careful. From the investigation, Rorschach finds out that the killer is local. He also finds a familiar logo at the killer's house, which he saw at Moloch's house before. At first, Rorschach thinks Moloch may be involved. He gets to Moloch's house only to find that he is murdered. Before he can leave, the police have arrived. Now he realizes that he has been framed. Rorschach jumps out of the window and tries to escape, but he is captured by the police. His identity is also revealed to the public. In prison, he tells his experience to a psychiatrist. He had a miserable childhood. His mother was a prostitute, and she didn't like him, so he was always bullied and abused. Growing up in this environment, he has an abhorrence of sin. Not going to endure it, and pours hot oil on the attacker's face. Nobody dares to stop him. Lots of prisoners here were arrested by Rorschach before. That's why they hate him so much. They even fight each other to get the chance of reforms and start helping people in their aircraft. They go to help Rorschach escape from the prison. When they arrive, the prison is in chaos. The police are busy dealing with the prisoners, so they get out without difficulties. Not long after that, Dr. Manhattan teleports Silk Spectre. Spectre 2 can't accept this truth, so she bursts into tears. Dr. Manhattan can't bear to see his beloved suffer, so he decides to return to Earth to stop the war. Meanwhile, Night Owl is murdered by Rorschach's enemy, local bar with Night Owl 2, hoping that they might get some information, but nobody is willing to help them. Somebody even says nasty things to them, so he teaches him a lesson. Finally, that guy tells Rorschach that it was Janie that asked him to hire a killer to kill Ozymandias. Then the TV news reports the murder of Night Owl. It happens that the murderer's accomplice is also in the slip into Ozymandias' company. They want to borrow some equipment to conduct an investigation. Then they realize something is wrong. Janie, Moloch, and the killer all worked for this company. The comedian also mentioned that Moloch and Janie were on the same list. If the person who sent a killer to kill Ozymandias is the same one who is behind the comedian's murder, as long as they can find out who is in charge of the company, they will not be far away from finding the truth. From these clues, somebody wants to frame Dr. Manhattan. Night Owl 2 hacks into the company's secret data and finds out that the parent company belongs to Ozymandias, who is the one that is behind all this. Knowing the truth, Night Owl 2 and Rorschach fly to Ozymandias' base in Antarctica. Ozymandias knows that they would come for him, so psyche profile that he is not devoid of emotions. So he takes advantage of that and forces him to leave the Earth. The comedian is the first one who figured out Ozymandias' plan. That's why he was murdered. To avoid suspicion, Ozymandias hired a hitman to kill himself, then he poisoned the killer. After that, he revealed clues to Rorschach on purpose and led him to go to Moloch's home. Before Rorschach arrived, Ozymandias killed Moloch and called the police. Ozymandias believes that mankind is greedy. Sooner or later, human beings will be killed by their own desires. He would rather sacrifice a few people's lives for world peace than waste time on stopping the nuclear war. For years he has been trying to replicate Dr. Manhattan's power. Now he uses this power to destroy 4 major cities in the world. Millions of people are killed in an instant. Everyone thinks it is Dr. Manhattan who did this. So the US and the Soviets unite against their common enemy, Dr. Manhattan. When Dr. Manhattan agrees with Ozymandias, he must remain silent. Spectre 2 and for this, there has to be a sacrifice if they want to preserve world peace. And he doesn't regret what he has done. In the end, the U.S. declares its cooperation with the Soviet Union and stops the war between them so as to fight against their real common enemy, Dr. Manhattan. A reporter later happens to find the diary left by Rorschach, which will tell people the Watchman struggles to fight for peace and the hard choices for the Watchman to make between the absolute righteousness.
Saw a huge upset with some hot new talent on the field. Now, Ronan has dominated the leaderboards for 3 years.
But it looks like he's finally got some competition. Former teammate Lancer has exploded onto the scene.
And he's got Team Ronan in his sights. They're out for blood tonight, and the gloves are coming off. Team Ronan coming hard out the gate. Brickhouse shields up, but here's Zephyr rushing for the kill. Uh-oh, Lancer's in trouble. And he's... Oh, my God! What is he doing? And Ronan's down, but Lancer's overextended. Oh, it's game over for Lancer, but... Wait! Who is this guy?
New Mech Arena champions, Team Lancer.
Bullies gives him a chance to make. The people rush towards him, beating him up, and in the process, crippling his leg. Han laughs as his plan succeeds, and with Golden Leg out of the way, he becomes one of the most successful coaches in the sport. Golden Leg, now crippled, works as an assistant for abilities, stating that he's no more than a cripple now. Golden Leg is dramatic fashion which leaves Golden Leg speechless. He walks towards him with flames of desire which hilariously burns the Golden Leg's face. He introduces himself as Sing, an advocator of Shaolin Kung Fu, and hands him a very shady business card. Sing tries to convince him that Kung Fu is very useful and how if everyone knew it, their lives would be much easier, such as the woman who trips on the banana peel. Golden Leg thinks this man is a joke and throws a beer can at him, but Sing proceeds to kick it so hard that it flew out of sight in an instant. Thinking that it was only an illusion, the two men parts ways and Sing proceeds to show his power by helping someone move his fridge. He collects the money from his garbage and goes to a restaurant to buy some buns. Sing is amazed when he sees the woman named May who makes buns using telling those things away. He tries to convince her with his last resort by singing on the street, which shocks everyone. But his rhythms were so hypnotizing that everyone started to join him in his ridiculous dance. They were all stopped when the restaurant owner rushed out and tells everyone to get lost. Sing takes this opportunity to run without paying, leaving his shoes behind, which the girl throws away in the trash. He looks for his first brother. Ironhead suggests that Sing performs on stage for the night's entertainment, but the boss tells Ironhead to join him and hits him again with the beer bottle. They perform horrendously on stage, and the customers are shocked at what they were doing. They go on stage and proceeds to beat up the two brothers. Sing tries to fight back, but he doesn't want to make his brother lose his job, so he concedes and gets knocked out. While urinating in public, Golden Leg finds a beer can stuck in a wall, but the gangsters continue to attack relentlessly. Sing kicks the soccer ball at one of the thugs, which sends him flying. He gets up, thinking everything is fine, but vomits soon after. He then kicks the ball again, breaking concrete walls and senses the true potential of Sing's power and suggests that he use it to play soccer. Shocked at the suggestion and possibility of using his talents, Sing rushes Golden Leg to teach him to play, but he says that he should at least have a pair of shoes first. He goes back to May for his shoes, but she says that she threw them away as they were broken. Just as he's about to leave in disappointment, she throws the shoes at him, fixed and with her stickers on them. Sing smiles in happiness. He then goes to all his brothers, asking them to join the soccer team in order to popularize Kung Fu, but each of them have their excuses and thinks that Sing is just dreaming. Their lives have been difficult after their master passed away, as they failed to see any use of their talents. None of them practice their Kung Fu anymore, and their skills have disappeared a long time ago. The sixth brother, 4. To his surprise, they all gather on the rooftop in a dramatic seriously to try and eat the leftovers. They had to drag the man away while he cries about his eggs. Golden Leg throws another at Sing, but this time it breaks on his pants. Sing senses danger and quickly throws another egg in the mouth of the third brother, which results in some French kissing action that shocks everyone. Sing makes progress in controlling his powers, but breaks the egg again. He throws it at the third brother's mouth, which resulted in more French kissing. Their training finally begins to show results as Sing demonstrates superhuman power at handling the ball, while everyone looks at him in amazement. Golden Leg puts his team in their first competition against another team infamous for their unique methods on the soccer field. In fact, they're composed of the thugs from the nightclub that Sing fought with in the past. You know something bad is going to happen when their captain keeps on dropping deadly weapons from his pants before the match even begins. The match goes normally in the beginning, but I have to say that just by looking at their skills, their chances of beating any other team is almost zero. The tone of the match quickly changes as they're about to score, and the opposing team attacks Sing with multiple. The other team tries to attack them, but stands no chance in the face of their powers. The brothers proceed to demonstrate their individual powers as they make a mockery out of the other team. They try to go through the goalie that looks like Bruce Lee by throwing their shoes at him, but he catches all of them and sends the ball flying to Sing. He jump kicks the ball to the opponent's goal while the other team hides in fear, but the ball only hits the goalpost, resulting in no score. Sing celebrates and welcomes his brother's return, while the thugs come together, offering to join their team as well. Hung is also building his new team and testing his team's abilities underwater, which causes a large explosion in the pool. He receives a phone call telling him that Golden Leg is trying to enter competition. Han goes to meet Golden Leg and his Shaolin soccer team, to which he's not impressed at all. He laughs at them, thinking that they pose no threat to anyone. He allows Golden Leg to enter competition, even paying for his entrance fee, just to see him humiliated. He tries to embarrass Golden Leg again in front of the public, telling him to wipe his shoes, but the whole team fights to do it and hilariously takes his shoe away. Sing goes to May to try to thank her for repairing his shoes. He shows her the beautiful dresses in the store and tells her to try them on. He wants her to be more confident and show her beauty to the whole world, but she has a hard time doing it with flies roaming everywhere on her hair. Sing tells her that he will be famous after he wins the matches, and he promises to buy her all the dresses in the world as he believes that she deserves them. But it's revealed that Sing only works here and promised to clean the floor in order to show May the dresses. In their first competition against the Tofu team, they managed to score so quickly that the opponents thought they were hallucinating. The opposition tries their best to protect their goal, but the Shaolin team continues to score, even sending their players into the goal along with the ball. The news travels to Han and shocks him as they score 42-0. The team quickly rises to fame while they completely destroys all their competitions. May is clearly moved by Sing's kind words as she goes to a scary-looking woman trying to do some plastic surgery. Personally though, if her looks are any indications of results, I would hesitate to go in, not to mention the nightmares I will be having afterwards. The team celebrates their success at May's restaurant, and they're shocked to see the results of her makeups. They proceed to make fun of her, and she gets angry like any girl would. The restaurant owner comes out to yell at May again, but this time she unleashes all her anger at the woman for abusing her, while the team is both frightened and cheering at the same time. She asks Sing whether if he likes her, which he tells her that he does, but only as a sister and a friend. She tells him that if his shoes breaks again, she can always fix it for him, to which Sing says to not worry as he will never wear old shoes anymore. I feel sorry for the girl as the man's clearly clueless when it comes to women, and this makes her cry. As the Shaolin team defeats their last opponents in the soccer field, they move on to the finals against Han's Devil team. Han has a meeting with Golden Leg, trying to offer him money like years ago so that they can avoid the competition. Golden Leg refuses the offer, which angers Han, thinking that his rival is too greedy. Golden Leg agrees that he is greedy, but not for money. He wants to win the national championship from Han's team. Sing goes to May's restaurant before the final competition, but sees that she's gone. He asks the restaurant owner about May, which she replies that May was fired. For some reason, her bread became bitter and sour in the last couple weeks and drove all the customers away. Sing picks up one of the buns on the floor and tastes it. He pauses for a moment and soon realizes that the girl must have been crying while making them. The conversation that they had before must have really broke her heart. The team arrives at the finals against the Devil team. They smile as they look up onto the trophy for the first place, but they have to defeat Han's team first. They begin attacking offensively and going through all the oppositions without any problem. The ball is passed to Sing as he kicks with all his might, but it was stopped effortlessly by the opponent's goalie with one hand in his pocket. He throws the ball back and dares Sing to try again. He goes for a trick shot, but fails as their goalkeeper is extremely fast. He tries for a third time, putting all his energy into the kick, but only manages to make the goalie use two hands. Han laughs at the power difference as he injected them with drugs beforehand, greatly increasing their battle power. The goalkeeper throws the ball across the field and hits the Shaolin team's goalie, knocking him over. The opponent proceeds to shoot the goal and sends Bruce Lee's doppelganger flying. He acts like everything's fine, but is wounded badly on his left hand. The opponent kicks again, using more force this time. The ball hits him so hard that it drops him to the ground. The enemy team proceeds to kick him in the face, which sends him flying across the backyard. Han reveals that his plan was never to win the game by scoring, but by crippling all their players with injury. He paid off the referee so that no one would call foul play. The Devil team continues to attack the Shaolin team's players, injuring most of them badly. Luckily, before they can do any more damage, the referee calls half-time. Some of the players become so afraid that they leave the team. Sing is enraged at the situation, and the brothers fight with Golden Leg at the frustration of their current predicament. If they sustain one more injury, they will become disqualified from the competition. The third brother tells everyone to be quiet as he volunteers to be goalie, the most dangerous position right now. The team tries to defend using shalom formation, but gets run over like bowling pins. The Devil team focuses all their might onto the goalie and proceeds to attack him with a barrage of kicks. The goalie is pushed closer and closer to the goal line while his clothing are ripped apart by flames. To everyone's surprise, he manages to catch the ball from the Devil team and shoots for an opening. They charge towards the opponent's goal and Singh manages to land a shot at the goalie. The ball bounces in the opposite direction but gets thrown out as the goalie hits the post. Han tells his team to use the final attack and they fire at the goalkeeper with tremendous force. He manages to stop the ball but gets knocked out by the shockwave. Without enough players, Shaolin team is forced to be disqualified. As they feel that all hopes are gone, Mei shows up in front of them with a new haircut, looking like she just came from Mars. She volunteers to be the goalie, but Singh refuses, telling her that it's way too dangerous. She sees that his shoes are broken and gives Singh the old ones that she repaired with even more stickers now. Mei walks to the goalpost in a dramatic fashion, but they quickly lose all hopes when she hits her head, then proceeds to stand next to the enemy's goalie. The team has no choice but to lower their heads in shame as she runs back to her goal. Mei tries sending the ball to her teammates, but it ends up right under the enemy's foot and her team screams in agony. The Devil team's forward concentrates all his might into a devastating kick heading straight for Mei, but she uses her Tai Chi to transform the energy as her own. Everyone is stunned in amazement as she plays with it like it was nothing. Singh looks at her with a proud expression while she smiles back at him. Mei throws the ball in the air while he jumps up and puts all his energy in one last kick. The attack was so powerful that it becomes a tornado and destroys all the members of the Devil team and their dignity at the same time. Han is furious that their team has lost, and in a fit of rage, trips and rolls down the stadium. The Shaolin team celebrates their victory as Singh looks lovingly at Mei's eyes. Han is taken to prison after being convicted of using illegal substance for their team. Sometimes later, Singh is jogging down the street, still wearing the shoes that Mei fixed for him. He sees the same woman who tripped and fell in the beginning, but this time she catches herself using Kung Fu in a stylish manner. Singh smiles as he sees even more people using Kung Fu in their daily lives, and is happy that he successfully popularized Kung Fu to everyone. So what do you guys think about this movie? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like my video, please press like and subscribe for more. I'll see you guys next time. Hello everyone, this is Mr. Brain Junkie here, and today we'll be talking about a fantasy film called Dragon Wars. Be ready for some spoilers ahead. Every 500 years, a woman is born with the spiritual energy to transform a serpent into a celestial dragon. The creature that possesses this power can determine humanity's fate by either destroying or saving the world. Somewhere in the city of Los Angeles, the police are examining the sudden appearance of a giant trail, seemingly caused by a large creature. Ethan is a reporter who's also here to investigate the situation, but the government agents refuse to answer any questions and tells him to leave immediately. However, the man notices something strange as he looks into the field and sees what appears to be a piece of scale buried inside the ground. Apparently, Ethan has seen this before when he was a child, and he begins recollecting the memories as he stares into a strange medallion that he wears. 15 years ago, Ethan went to a local antique store, accompanying his father as the man tries to sell a blade to the store owner named Jack. The boy looks through the items and sees a mysterious box unlocking itself after sensing his presence. The box opens and reveals a giant piece of scale that emanates an aura towards the boy. The store owner perceives this and begins having a heart attack, but when the father tries to call the ambulance, Jack tells the man to buy a medicine from the neighboring shop instead. Ethan's father tells the boy to look after the old man and runs off quickly, but it turns out that Jack faked everything in order to speak to the boy alone. He tells Ethan that there are giant serpents called Imugis that live in the heavens, and every 500 years, one of the serpents is awarded for its good deeds and turned into a celestial dragon. For this to occur, the creature needs a magical object called the Yuiju, but the evil serpent Baraki and his followers have tried for a long time to steal this item. 5 centuries ago, the heaven decided to hide the Yuiju by sending it to a city in Korea and guarded by its best warriors Haram and his master Buchan. But the evil serpent also knew the location of this magical item and plans to steal it one day. The local lord's wife gave birth to a girl named Naren, and the one destined to be the holder of the Yuiju with a giant birthmark on her shoulder. When the girl becomes 20 years of age, the Yuiju would form inside her, and the evil serpent would appear once again. Naren soon becomes a beautiful woman, and she begins falling in love with Haram, who shares the affection as well. The master shows Haram the good Imugi, who's destined to become a celestial dragon, and the young man looks at the giant creature in shock as it swims inside the waters. Buchan also gives the man the medallion that only the protector of Yuiju wears, which can protect him from harm if his life is in danger. Eventually, the evil serpent brings all its followers to the village in search for the girl, and the army begins shooting numerous bombs at the people, causing tremendous damage. They charge at the city and kills all the men one by one, as the people are no match for their dragons and magic. They capture all the women and looks through every one of them, trying to find the girl with the giant birthmark on her shoulder. The army soon arrives at the Lord's house and kills Naren's father in front of her, causing the girl to run out and mourn for her dying parents. The soldier rips open her clothing, discovering her true identity, and forcefully takes her away from her home. Luckily, the master flies in and fights the army with his magic, giving Haram the chance to save the girl. The two run into hiding, and the man tells Naren the truth about her destiny. The master manages to escape the fight after being wounded, but finds the medallion on the ground with his pupil nowhere in sight. Haram tries to run away with Naren instead of bringing her to the good Imugi, and the evil serpent Baraki chases them closely behind. The creature corners them on a cliff, and the two decide to jump and fall into the oceans, killing themselves in the process. The store owner gives Ethan the Protector's medallion and reveals that he's actually the reincarnation of Buchan, and the boy used to be Haram, the warrior that he raised. This is their second chance in fulfilling the prophecy, and the boy must find a girl named Sarah, who also has the dragon birthmark, and bring her to the Grand Cave. After remembering the girl's name, Ethan goes to his friend Bruce and tells him to find the girl, as she's likely to be related to the giant trails. But the friend tells Ethan that they need more details, as there are probably thousands of women in the city with the same name. Meanwhile, Sarah sees the news on TV about the gigantic landmarks and suddenly becomes wary about her safety, running home even without saying goodbye to her friend. She's clearly subconsciously aware of this danger and tries her best to protect herself by looking through a book about ancient prophecies. Her friend Brandy goes to her home and is shocked to see that Sarah has put up numerous paper talismans in the house to ward off evil. The girl tries to comfort Sarah and tells her that she's only imagining the danger, but this doesn't help at all, as she can't shake the instinctual fear inside her heart. Sarah's worry turns out to be valid, as the giant serpent has appeared in the city looking for the Yuiju, destroying everything on its path. The girl begins having nightmares and waking up at night. She feels an intense pain coming from her birthmark and calls the ambulance to take her to the hospital. Brandy tries to look for her friend after finding out that Sarah was hospitalized, but the nurse refuses to let her visit right now as they pass the visiting hours. With no other choice, Brandy goes to Sarah's house to pack some clothing for her friend, but suddenly feels the ground shaking from the outside. The girl runs out of the house, only to see the giant serpent in front of her and screams in fear. Baraki bites her before she can escape and tosses her into the pool, leaving her to die. The next day, Ethan receives the report that a woman was killed inside a house by what the neighbors claim to be a giant snake. He immediately heads towards the location, fearing that Sarah may have died already. When he arrives at the scene, he realizes that the girl is not the one he was looking for, and learns from the neighbor that Sarah was taken to a hospital before the attack. He rushes towards the location to find the girl, but is stopped by the front desk, who tells him that Sarah was put into quarantine for a wound on her shoulder that may cause infections. Ethan tries to look for another way in, and meets a doctor who's a big fan of the news reporter and helps him find the girl right away. He sees the woman sitting on the bed and tells her that he believes in the danger that she's feeling and explains that they must leave this place as the monster is nearby. Suddenly, they feel the whole building shake violently as the giant serpent has tracked them to the hospital already. The doctor rushes in and tells the two to leave right away as they're in great danger. Ethan takes the girl towards the exit as the doctor slowly transforms into Jack, who was watching over them from the very beginning. They run to the car driven by Bruce, and the man hits the gas pedal right away after seeing the monster appear in the garage, chasing after them as it destroys everything in sight. They rush out of the hospital and manages to escape quickly as the creature charges out one step behind and roars in frustration towards its prey. Before they can catch their breath, Bruce hits someone with the car and stops immediately, but it turns out that the man is a servant of Baraki and plans to take Sarah back to his master. The two tries everything they can to stop the general, but their attacks are useless against the man's armor. Luckily, the man was hit by a car before the girl was taken, and the driver takes them away quickly from danger. The woman drops off the two after confirming that they're not hurt, and begins transforming back into Jack, showing that the old man continues to help them in their perilous journey. Sarah is confused about everything that's happening and questions the visions that she keeps on seeing in her dreams, doubting her own sanity. In order to find out about the truth behind her past, Ethan suggests that they go to a psychology professor of his who specializes in extracting repressed memories. He promises to keep her safe as they share a kiss on the beach, but Ethan realizes that her destiny is to die if she's really the holder of the Yuiju. On the other side, the continuous attacks in the city has caught the government's attention, and they begin to suspect that Sarah is somehow responsible for the monster's appearance. The mission leader realizes that they may have to terminate the girl if they're not able to contain the situation, as the creature seems to be looking for her. At the same time, Baraki's general begins summoning more of the serpent's followers and monsters into the world using numerous ancient scrolls, and they prepare to take Sarah by any means necessary. The government manages to track down the location of the giant serpent and sends an army of special forces to terminate the beast. They head inside the cave of the monster and sees the enormous creature appearing in front of them. The soldiers quickly retreat in fear and begin shooting at Baraki, but their attacks are useless as they continue to run from the monster. However, the serpent's army arrives on the other side and forces the soldiers into a corner. The general summons his magic towards the man and destroys them in a single attack. Meanwhile, Ethan's professor is trying to extract the suppressed memories from Sarah's mind, and eventually, the girl begins seeing her childhood and then further into her past life as well. Her spiritual power begins awakening as her memories return, surrounding her in glowing lights as Ethan watches in amazement. Sarah recovers from the experience, but her powers have also alerted Baraki to their location, forcing them to run immediately away from the house. The two drives away quickly as the giant snake destroys the house and chases them close behind, tearing up the entire street in the process. Luckily, they manage to lose the monster in the residential areas, and Ethan calls his friend to arrange a helicopter as he realizes that they can no longer be safe on the ground. They meet up with Bruce in a restaurant, who gives them supplies and tells them that the helicopter is on top of the news building. But the giant serpent manages to locate them once again and begins destroying the entire building to capture the girl. They run quickly away from the building as the monster chases them from behind. Before they can be captured, the police officers fire at the giant creature and distract it long enough for them to escape temporarily. They continue running towards the news building as the monster chases after them, destroying everything on its path and sending cars flying in the air. The people in the city panic and runs in fear while the creature causes numerous explosions, resulting in tremendous damage in the area. The two runs inside the news building and eventually makes it to the rooftop where the helicopter is waiting for them. But the creature has noticed their whereabouts and begins climbing to the roof as well. The helicopter tries to take off, but the serpent launches and grabs onto the aircraft, forcing Ethan to jump out with Sarah before it smashes the carrier through the air and onto the ground. Dark clouds begin covering the sky as Baraki roars in victory and stares directly at the couple, planning to devour them to acquire the power of the heavens. Luckily, they're saved when the US military arrives and begins shooting furiously at the creature with a barrage of missiles and bullets, giving them the chance to escape from the building. The serpent tries to fight back and destroys multiple choppers, but the army's combined firepower manages to knock down the giant beast and sends it tumbling to the ground. They continue to shoot relentlessly as the creature screams in pain, but what they don't realize is that an army of dragon is approaching quickly to the city. The monsters attack the choppers by shooting out multiple fireballs, causing huge explosions as the aircrafts are forced to retreat. The ground troops of the monsters arrive as well and begins launching numerous bombs at the police, causing explosions to engulf the area. The military responds by mobilizing armored vehicles towards the creatures and its army of darkness led by the Serpent's general. The two armies march closer towards each other and begins a massive battle as the monsters charge towards the US military. The tank fires at the army and begins killing the creatures, but the enemy also retaliates by shooting numerous bombs at the vehicles, causing tremendous damage. Meanwhile, Ethan manages to escape the building with Sarah, but they run into the government agents who claims to be here to help them and take them away from the chaos. The agents bring them to an underground facility, and the senior officer reveals that he knows about the ancient legend. He plans on killing the girl to end this madness, even if it means that the creatures will come back 500 years later. Before the man can fire the gun, the other agent shoots his partner as he realizes that in order to save humanity permanently, the girl must live. He gives them the car keys and tells Ethan to protect Sarah until they can change the fate of the world. Ethan drives the girl towards the borders and plans to escape into Mexico, but Sarah claims that their actions are useless because Baraki will track her down wherever she goes. Before they can finish their conversation, the dragons attack their car with fireballs, causing them to flip over and crash onto the road. Ethan slowly loses consciousness as the monsters begin surrounding them. When the main character wakes up, he realizes that he's tied up to a pole in the deserts, surrounded by the army of darkness. They bring the girl towards the altar and ties her up to the table, preparing her to be sacrificed to the evil serpent. The general and the army chant Baraki's name as they open the massive door, releasing the monster so that it may devour the girl. The giant serpent moves closer to the woman and towers over everyone, while Sarah screams in fear at the sight of this monstrosity. Ethan screams the woman's name hopelessly, which awakens the medallion on his chest, summoning the thunders from the heavens, which concentrates the energy into a large shockwave that stuns the entire army and turns them into dust. The giant serpent recovers from the explosion and attacks them with anger, knocking Ethan away from the girl. Before he can devour Sarah, another Imugi charges towards it and knocks it to the ground. He carries Baraki by its jaws and throws the monster away from the couple. The two giant monsters roar at each other, and Baraki launches towards the other Imugi, biting its neck and throwing the giant serpent onto the floor. Sarah realizes that she must fulfill her destiny, as it's the only way this whole thing can end. She walks towards the serpents and summons the Yuiju from her body into the sky. Baraki tries to grab the glowing orb, but Sarah sends it the other way, and the good Imugi swallows the energy at this opportunity. The evil serpent sees this and begins attacking his foe, but the good Imugi transforms and sheds the skin on its body, finally turning into a celestial dragon. It screams furiously and grabs Baraki, slamming the serpent onto the ground. The monster recovers and begins attacking the dragon once more, but is no match for the celestial creature as it gets thrown to the floor once again. The dragon flies towards the sky, and Baraki tries to grab onto its tail, causing both of them to launch into the air. The good Imugi turns around and strikes the serpent by its neck, tossing the monster downwards as it crashes into the ground. The dragon then charges a massive fireball and shoots it right inside Baraki's mouth, causing the serpent to burn from the inside and eventually turn into dust. The dragon flies back towards Ethan and spits out the Yuiju, which causes Sarah's body to evaporate into a glowing aura that fuses with the magical orb. The celestial dragon roars towards the heavens and grabs onto the Yuiju. It then launches towards the sky and slowly vanishes into the clouds, as it sheds tears of sympathy for Ethan's loss. Jack appears behind the man and tells him that he did the right thing, before vanishing as well to the other world. Ethan says goodbye to his master and begins walking towards the desert into a new future that he's created for mankind. So what do you guys think about this movie? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like my video, please press like and subscribe for more. I'll see you guys next time.
If you
you were kidnapped by a serial killer and forced to play a brutal death game, what would you do? These are the most unfair traps in the whole Saw franchise, especially the last trap, which is the hardest of them all, and you'll never guess how we're going to beat it. So I'm going to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat every death trap in Spiral. This man is about to be brutally murdered by a death trap, and it's like nothing you've ever seen. It's July 4th, and this off-duty cop is walking around a carnival when he sees a thief run away with a woman's purse. The detective chases after him through the crowded streets, but he can't keep up and loses the man's trail. That's when he finds an open manhole and realizes the thief has gone into the sewers. With no choice, he follows the purse snatcher down into the hole and has no idea he's walking right into a trap. Hearing a noise in the distance, the cop searches around in the darkness and spots the thief sitting on a chair, but the man isn't moving. Getting closer, the detective kicks into the ground, but discovers that it's just a mannequin. Suddenly, a man in a pig mask appears and grabs him from behind, knocking him out cold. Hours later, the cop slowly wakes up to find his hands have been restrained with barbed wire and his tongue is locked in a vice. Looking around, he realizes he's standing on top of a stepladder in the middle of a subway rail line, and in front of him is a television set. Suddenly, the TV turns on, and his kidnapper in the pig mask tells the detective that he must now play a death game. He's being punished for lying on the witness stand and sending innocent people to jail. Now, he must rip his own tongue out if he wants to live, but has only 2 minutes to act before the train will run him down. With that, the television set turns off, leaving the man alone to face his punishment. The detective pulls the barbed wire off his wrists and tries to pry the vise open, but it's useless. He can't force it apart, and on the other end of the tunnel, the lights of the train are getting closer. Realizing there are only seconds left before his death, he kicks away the ladder and falls, ripping off his tongue just as the train slams into him, turning the detective into a bloody stain on the windshield. That's 1 down and 5 to go. Okay, this is super unfair. The man only had 2 minutes to escape this trap, and both of his choices guarantee to end in death. This already makes it absolutely clear that whoever's doing this is only interested in vengeance, and that makes their chances of survival extremely slim. First of all, ripping out your own tongue is not a viable option, because the tongue is connected to the oral floor, which is a massive network of other connective tissues that are attached to each other in your mouth. If your tongue is ripped out, it's going to take the oral floor and most of your jaw along with it. Even if you manage to survive, you'd pass out from the physical shock and the train would run you down. So we need another way to escape this trap that won't get us killed. The best way to think of this is by prioritizing the threat. And right now, the most dangerous threat is the train, because it's the only factor in this that has a ticking clock. Look at it this way. If we know that in less than 2 minutes we're going to be killed by a train, then it's obviously the first thing we should be thinking about how to beat. And it makes it way more important than solving how to free your tongue from the vice. If you deal with this problem based on the biggest threat first, then it simplifies the trap for you so that you don't get overwhelmed and panic before figuring out what you should do to survive. The first thing to do is make sure we support ourselves from a stronger part of the body. So we should reach up and wrap these chains here around our arms as much as possible to protect our tongue. If we accidentally kick this chair down, then all of your body's weight is going to be on your tongue, and we can't let that happen, so we need more points of contact to hold ourselves up. This adds stronger support between you and the chain, and creates slack on the line so our tongue won't be at risk of being ripped out. Now, if we look up to the ceiling of the tunnel, there are pillars that create a gap between the train and the ceiling. If you look here, you can also see that there's several feet of space above the train, and if you manage to get up there, you just might be able to avoid getting hit, but this would be a losing strategy. The major problem with this solution is that this guy had to literally rip barbed wire through his wrists in order to free his hands, and that's going to seriously limit your ability to pull yourself all the way up this chain. I mean, look, John Constantine can't even light his own cigarette after sustaining life-threatening injuries to his wrists, so clutching these chains with your hands is pretty much out of the question. We're also suspended from the lowest point of the ceiling, so there would be no way to pull yourself up high enough to hide in the gap. This leaves you with only one possible solution to avoid the train. If it were me, I would wrap my arms around the chain and begin swinging. By pushing off of the walls on either side of the tunnel, we might be able to time it right and avoid a head-on collision. You'll still be hit by the side of the train cars, but you'll be rolling off of them instead. A subway train's average speed is about 17 miles per hour, so there's a much better chance of survival under these conditions than the alternative. There are also these poles here that you can easily grab with your feet, and the great thing is that the pillars here on the sides create much more of a gap between the train and the walls of the tunnel. This gives you more room to hide behind them and protect your body, and you can pull yourself to safety using your feet instead of your injured hands. If we can avoid death even for a few seconds, the train will hit the television in the middle of the tracks, and the conductor will be forced to stop the train immediately under their safety protocols. Once the train is stopped, we'll be able to make enough noise to call for help and be saved. It's a long shot, but it's literally the only strategy that has a chance, and I'll be damned if we don't try. Now, this is just the beginning, because there are 4 more death traps, and the last one will shock you, because it's one of the most unbeatable traps in the entire franchise, and I'm going to tell you exactly how to escape it. The next day, Detective Zeke and his brand new partner, Schenk, are called to investigate a death. Arriving at the subway, they find the dead body of the man who was run over by the train. His new partner thinks it's just a homeless guy who wanted to end it, but that's when Zeke here notices this corpse is wearing a smartwatch and a ring on his finger. So he couldn't have been just some random homeless person, and they both realize there's a lot more to this case than meets the eye. They return back to the precinct to make a report, but that's when the detective gets a strange package in the mail. Inside, he discovers a thumb drive and plugs it into his partner's computer to see what's on it. A video starts playing, showing the trademark symbol of the notorious Jigsaw, who died 15 years ago. The copycat killer promises that he's coming after every corrupt cop in their department, but Zeke here recognizes the building in the video. It's the courthouse, and he decides to check it out. Arriving at the scene, they find the red spiral painted on the wall and a package hidden on a windowsill. Retrieving the box, the cop opens it up carefully and is shocked to find a gift-wrapped tongue with a police badge inside, but he doesn't know who it belongs to. Whoever's doing this is a cop killer, and he's coming after every single one of them. Later at the precinct, the captain reveals that the body from the subway is Detective Boss, a member of their police department. Upset at losing a close friend, Zeke demands to be the leading investigator on the case, and the captain agrees. But soon he'll discover that this is just the beginning of a game tailor-made for him. Okay, these detectives should have taken the killer's threat much more seriously. In the video, the killer promised he was going to hunt down every dirty cop in their department, but if this police force had any brains, they'd realize that this one message has just handed all the information we need to crack this case. First of all, the package with the thumb drive was sent specifically to Zeke here, and the video was speaking directly to him as well. There would be no reason for the killer to single him out unless it was either a personal vendetta or that he already knew that Zeke was leading the investigation. This is important because nobody outside of this room would know that Zeke is the leading detective on this case, and that narrows down the pool of potential suspects to the members of this police department. Now we can deduce that this Jigsaw copycat has eyes and ears within this precinct, and that tells us exactly how we need to handle the investigation from this point on. Once we realize this, the most important thing to do is control the information, because then we can use it to draw out the killer. The smartest thing to do is feed misinformation about the case to other cops that we have reason to suspect and see how they react. The biggest advantage here is that we already know that this killer wants to kill dirty cops, so we can catch him easily by using dirty cops as bait. If I suspected someone in the department of being connected to the Jigsaw killer, I would send other dirty cops to investigate leads on the case, and if the guy we suspected started taking off to track them down, then it gives us a really good reason to think that he's working with the killer. There's no guarantee this will work, but it makes it much harder for the killer to hide if he wants to continue killing other cops without getting caught. That night, Detective Fitch and his partner find one of the cameras outside a pawn shop. Watching the tapes, they see the thief that the first victim was chasing last night, and the man recognizes him as a junkie he's arrested before. He tells his partner to report back to the precinct while he goes to an abandoned factory to look for their suspect. Later that night, the detective arrives at the factory and goes inside to search for the junkie when he spots someone lying on a mattress. He tells the man to get up, but there's no response. Removing the blanket, he is startled to find a pig mask hiding underneath it, and the detective recognizes it as a sign that the killer was here. He tries to call for backup, but never notices the hooded figure in the shadows. He's then grabbed from behind and becomes the next person to play Jigsaw's game. Waking up, the man finds himself with a metal trap over his head and his fingers stuck in fishnets attached to a massive gearbox. Panicking, he tries to break himself free, but has no way to escape, and the fishnets attached to his fingers are too tight to remove. That's when this television set turns on, and the killer tells him he wants to play a game. As a dirty cop, years ago he shot and killed an innocent man just because he felt insulted, and now he must pay for his crime. In 90 seconds, this metal container will be filled with water, and if it reaches these copper wires before he escapes, he'll be electrocuted. The only way to survive is to bite down on the device to start the motor and rip his trigger-happy fingers off. With the clock ticking, the man bites down on the bar and the gears start to turn as the machine pulls him forward. The fishing line leads his arms through a pipe railing, and as the lines tighten, his fingers begin to slowly tear from his hands. It's absolutely horrifying, and he manages to stay conscious, but he's run out of time. The water reaches the copper wires, and the detective is electrocuted to a crisp. That's 2 down and 4 to go. Okay, this might seem hopeless, but if you look closely enough, you'll realize this jigsaw copycat is getting lazy, because there are several ways he could have hacked this death trap. Just like the first trap, the most important problem to solve is time, because in 90 seconds, this pool is going to fill up and will be electrocuted. The smartest thing to do is to immediately run to the edge of the pool to create slack on the line, because this buys us more space to move around and look for a way to escape. Now, if we prioritize the threats, the next thing we should go for are the copper wires here, because this is where the electricity will be coming from. If we run up and twist these wires off the poles and out of the water, then even if the pool overflows, we won't be electrocuted, and that's one less time constraint we will need to worry about. The last problem to solve is the finger trap, but if we act quickly, it's not as hard as it might seem. The only way to escape is by cutting through the nets on each finger, but luckily, the killer left us a very sharp material right here in the pool. I would break this light bulb here and use the sharps of the bulb to fray the nets and cut our fingers loose. This solution will give you more time to escape than any other option, because if you have a shard of glass in your hand, you can still try to cut yourself free even after the gearbox pulls your hands through the pipe rail. This man wasted valuable time mindlessly fighting against the trap, and didn't consider what options he had to work with until it was too late. The next day, Zeke here gets another gift box from the killer and plugs the USB stick into his computer. This time, the video shows a pickup truck under a bridge and a little doll telling him that until he reveals his secret, more cops will die. The detectives arrive at the scene of the crime and slowly approach the truck. Zeke here opens the door and suddenly a rotting pig corpse falls out, but inside is another gift wrap package from the killer. Opening the box, they're horrified to discover 10 ripped off fingers and the police badge of Detective Fitch, their fellow officer. That's when Zeke here starts to recognize a pattern. He remembers years ago when he had requested for backup, and the very same detective didn't bother responding to the call. Zeke here had to face an armed gunman alone and got shot in the process. Both cops who have gone missing from the department were dirty cops, and it must have been why they were chosen. Trying to put the pieces together, Zeke heads to the abandoned factory where they find the body of the second victim. He died in a brutal death trap, but there must have been another reason why he was targeted. Zeke asks the dead cop's partner why the man was snooping around this factory, and she tells him they were both investigating the security cameras in the area. They found a tape of the man who the first victim was chasing. It was a junkie that they arrested before, and knew he slept in this factory from time to time. Her partner investigated the place on his own without her, but she has no idea if he found the junkie or not. Without any leads, the cops try to figure out why the killer has chosen this police department and what his personal reason might be. The rookie then asks him if this killer could be someone who has a grudge against Zeke here, and that gives him an idea. They visit a church where an AA meeting is taking place, and the rookie finds out the group's leader was Zeke's former partner. We learned that years ago, this guy killed an innocent civilian, and it was all approved by Article 8, which gave cops free rein to crack down hard on crime by any means necessary. Zeke here testified against his partner and put him in jail, but everyone on the police force has hated him ever since. The detective asks the ex-cop where he was on July 4th, and the man tells him he was here at a meeting that night. Zeke knows something is off and can't figure out how all the pieces fit together, but by the time he realizes who's doing this, he'll have no choice but to join the killer to survive. Okay, this has gone far enough. In the video that the killer sent to them, he clearly stated that he was planning to hunt down members of this dirty police department. And now with 2 dead cops, that's enough to tell me that it's a bad f***ing idea to continue this investigation. As detectives, they're required to follow leads, but the killer is using their investigation to lure them into a controlled environment where he can make them his next victim. If it were me, I would strongly advocate to dump this investigation into the hands of the FBI, and they would have no choice but to take responsibility for the case. Up potential mass murder of police officers is already going to draw attention of federal law enforcement, and since the Jigsaw Killer has committed crimes across state lines, it automatically becomes FBI jurisdiction. This means the corrupt police force won't have to get involved on any level, and if they aren't investigating the case, then they are much less likely to be lured out by the killer and captured. It's not a foolproof tactic, but it makes it much harder for the killer to target them because he won't be able to predict their movements. The obvious solution is restricting the killer's actions in any way you can, because he'll be pushed further out into the open to get what he wants, and as soon as he makes a mistake, he'll be much easier to capture. The next morning, another green package arrives from the killer, and this time it's much bigger. Looking inside, he finds a doll wearing a pig mask, but they're horrified when they discover that it's wrapped in human skin. He takes a letter out of the box, reading a warning from the killer that he should be careful while he searches for more victims, because he's going to take his head. The detective flips the doll around and discovers a piece of flesh with the name Charlie tattooed on it. He realizes the skin was taken from his partner's arm. They're horrified, but this detective notices that there's something else inside. Lifting the layer of human flesh, he removes a bottle of Constantine branded paint, and Zeke knows exactly what that is. His father used to take him to the same place when he used to be a hobby shop during his childhood. He leaves the police station and heads to Constantine, which is now a butcher shop. They walk into the back room, horrified to find the corpse of his new partner hanging from a meat hook, and all of his skin has been removed. That's 3 down, and 3 more to go. Zeke is torn that his own partner has been killed and can do nothing about it. Every new death is getting more personal than the last, and Zeke here will stop at nothing to get revenge. Leaving the crime scene, Zeke is headed back to the police station when a dispatcher calls in. Another officer has been attacked nearby, and realizing it fits the killer's pattern, he responds to the call. Arriving at the scene, he parks his car and walks through the crowded streets to look for the injured cop. When he finds him, the man reveals he was attacked by someone wearing a pig mask. Suddenly, he remembers the message that the killer sent to him in the box, threatening to take his head, and he realizes that Angie, the head of the police department, is in danger. He immediately tries to call her, but she's down in the precinct basement and can't get a signal. She's next to die, and this Jigsaw copycat has already set up the most unfair death trap we've ever seen. The police captain walks into the cold case room, and that's when she sees the masked killer standing inside. The door behind her suddenly closes itself shut, and she tries to call for help, but that's when smoke bombs fill the room with a toxic gas. The woman collapses to the floor unconscious, with no one around to save her. The captain wakes up restrained to a metal slab with a faucet looming over her face. Finding a tape recorder beside her, she plays a recording, and the killer tells her she's about to be punished for her crimes. For years, she helped cover up corruption in her department, and now she's going to be covered in burning hot wax until she suffocates. Her only way to escape is to sever her spinal cord using this blade under her neck. As soon as the tape stops, the hot wax begins to drip onto her face, and she starts screaming in agony. Okay. This is really unfair. The killer gave her a choice to either suffocate from burning wax or to sever her spinal cord. This is a death sentence, and once again, time is not on our side. But that doesn't mean this isn't unbeatable. The first problem to deal with is this cloth. The only reason it's on her head is to make sure the wax covers her face enough to suffocate her. The cloth is added to the death trap for a very specific reason, and it's the same reason it's used in waterboarding. If you have a cloth over your face like this, it allows water to enter your nose and mouth, but you can't spit the water back out because it's being blocked by the cloth. So I first will be doing everything I can to remove the cloth before the wax hardens over my airways and I suffocate to death. Now, the second thing to consider is that this wax is currently in liquid form, and just like any liquid, it wants to flow towards the path of least resistance. It might sound obvious, but this is a really big deal, because it means you might actually have some control over this thing. Let's face it, this woman is completely tied down, and nobody can hear her scream. This is nearly impossible to escape, but even though things look hopeless here, the one and only thing that we can control is where the liquid flows. This is a natural law of physics, and it means surviving becomes simply about directing the flow of the liquid away from your airways to ensure that you don't suffocate. The best and only way to do this is to turn your head sideways and tilt it at a sloping angle to direct the flow of the wax away from your nose and mouth. It's really important to remember that we don't actually need to escape this trap at all, because this woman is already inside of the police station. Eventually, someone will find her, and that's a huge advantage that the 2 other victims didn't have. All we need to do is beat the time constraint and survive long enough to be rescued by someone else in the building. Zeke finally arrives at the police station and walks through the offices searching for the captain. But Detective O'Brien here tells him she's in the basement looking into a cold case. He runs down the stairs into the lower levels and they race to unlock the door. But when they make it inside, they find the woman laying still on the slab. Her entire head is encased in hardened black wax. And when the man peels away the layers, he realizes they're too late. She was already dead before he got here. That's 4 down and it'll be 2 to go. Furious, he looks over the surveillance footage of the room and discovers that 13 minutes of video is missing from the tapes. The killer must have hacked the system and deleted the records. Zeke finds a list of people who logged into the police server in the last few hours and recognizes the badge number of his older partner, who's no longer a cop. Deciding to bring him in for questioning, he heads out the door, but the other detective points out that his father is also a suspect. As the former police captain, the man had access to the surveillance system, and the place where the rookie's body was found was somewhere he took Zeke as a kid. The detective flips out on him for the accusation, and they get into a fight. But the man can't argue with the truth. His father might be a suspect, but he has no idea where he is. He arrives at the church where his old partner lives and storms into the building screaming his name, but nobody is inside. With no clues, the detective begins to walk out and call his dad to leave a voice message, but as soon as he steps out of the church, he's grabbed by a figure in a pig mask and knocked out cold. When he wakes up, he finds himself handcuffed to a pipe in an abandoned factory and sees another man tied to the ceiling. That's when he notices a bobby pin on the floor and uses it to pick the lock in his handcuffs. Getting up, he walks over to the man and takes the bag off of his head to discover that it's his old partner. Zeke here still thinks he's the killer and takes a recorder from the man's neck to play the tape. The copycat Jigsaw challenges him to a game, giving him the choice of rescuing his old partner or letting him die and throwing away the key. That's when a buzzer goes off and activates this massive glass grinder. The detective realizes what's going to happen and tries to pick the locks, but it's no use. The first bottles fall into the grinder and the glass begins to shoot out. Zeke runs out of the way and hides as the man gets shredded by the glass until the machine finally powers down. Okay, this could have been easily avoided, but this is the one trap so far where the time limit is actually a blessing in disguise. This machine powers itself back down after 17 seconds, and that gives us a window to intervene without getting ourselves killed in the process. Obviously, the easier thing to do would be to let him die, but it's not the smartest decision. This is no longer about escaping, it's about whether we decide to save him or not. Now, for all we know, the real trap could be to frame us as the Jigsaw copycat, and if this room were rigged with cameras and were watching us as we decide to sit back and let this man die, that wouldn't exactly help our case. So the best decision here is to save him. The good news is, it's a very beatable trap with some help. There's a lot of stuff in this room that you can use to try and help this man out without getting yourself hurt in the process. If you look here, these are huge crates of recycled glass bottles, and the shelf here is not fixed to the ground. I would move the shelving unit in front of the holes here so that when the glass starts shooting out, it's going to be hitting the shelf and the boxes on it, and that's going to prevent this guy from getting sliced to death from the flying glass. Since the holes here are at about head height, if Zeke was close enough to the machine, he could easily go underneath and pull the shelf into place without getting hurt at all. Once there's somebody blocking most of the glass from hitting anyone, the next thing we should do is simply knock down as many bottles off of the conveyor belt as possible, because if no bottles are going into the machine, then no glass is going to come flying out of it. Now, it's also extremely likely that this machine has an emergency shutoff switch somewhere in the room, and if no glass is shooting out, then we can use the rest of our time looking for how to turn the machine off. Zeke runs back to help the man out of his chains, but the device powers back up and starts shooting glass through the air. Zeke runs back into hiding as the glass shards blow even faster than before, and they tear this man's back into pieces. It's absolutely brutal, but that's when Zeke here remembers what the serial killer's tape said about throwing away the key, and sees a trash can in a corner of the room. Flipping it over, a key to the padlock drops out onto the floor. Running through the flying glass with only a trash can to protect himself, the detective unlocks his ex-partner's chains and the death trap shuts off, but the man has already died from his wounds. That's 5 down and only 1 to go. A door suddenly opens, and the detective goes through to confront the Jigsaw copycat. As he enters the next room, he's surprised to discover his rookie partner is waiting for him. This rookie faked his own death, and reveals that his own father was shot 15 years ago by none other than Zeke's former partner. As a child, he saw the whole thing with his own eyes, and remembered that Zeke was the only one who stood up for justice, because he ratted his partner out and put him behind bars. Now, the killer wants to make a deal, and asks Zeke here to help him kill all the dirty cops in the department. But that's when the rookie here tells him something completely unexpected. He's been keeping Zeke's father hostage for days without anyone knowing, and the only way he can save him is to accept his offer. With no choice, the detective agrees to help the killer, but only if he promises to set his dad free first. The rookie isn't sure if he can trust him, and decides to make a call to the police, reporting that there's a crazed gunman at this abandoned factory. That's when the killer gives him the gun to put him through one final test. Entering another room, he sees his father suspended in a death machine with tubes draining his blood into jars on the ground. Horrified to see his dad in a death trap, he demands that the killer set his father free. But the rookie reveals he's only got one bullet left in the chamber, and he'll need to use it to save his father. Looking out the window, the killer sees the cops have arrived and tells Zeke that he has 3 minutes to save his dad before his body is fully drained of blood. But the only way to set him free is to shoot a bullet at this target. Okay, this is one of the stupidest things I've ever seen. This is like a carnival game for the criminally insane, and if you hit the target, you get a prize that nobody wants. The first thing we need to point out is that this is way too much blood. The human body has about 1.5 gallons, and from what I can see here, he's already drained more than that. Each of these 8 bottles around him definitely look like they could be 2 liters in size. So if they're all filled halfway up, then he would have drained more blood than his body even had to begin with, and he should be dead. Now, if we put this problem aside for the moment, there's actually a perfectly logical way to solve this death trap in less than 3 minutes. First, we should take out the threat, so I would shoot the rookie in the leg. We need him alive so that he can be interrogated, and if the SWAT team arrives to find a dead cop, they'll get the wrong idea about the situation. We also need to remember that time is our enemy, so the next thing to do is gather all the tubes that are draining the father's blood and tie knots into them. This will take less than 1 minute to accomplish, and once the tubes are tied, the blood will have nowhere to flow, so the father will be safe. The last thing I would do is throw the empty gun at the target to help the father down. It's low enough to be within throwing distance, and since his blood isn't flowing out anymore, it doesn't matter if we miss the target and need to try a couple of times to hit it. Once the father is lowered down, then we can start to take the needles out of his arms and try to help him out of the trap. As Zeke tries to decide what to do, the killer reveals that his father is hiding a dark secret and forces him to tell his son the truth. That's when the father confesses that when he was chief of police, he was the one who ordered the whole department to cut the crime rate by any means necessary, and that included shooting innocent people like the rookie's father. Zeke can't believe what he's hearing, but with no choice, he shoots the target and sets his father free. He runs up to check on his dad, but the killer is getting away. Leaving him behind, the detective chases after the Jigsaw copycat, trying to stop him, but he's just made his biggest mistake yet. The SWAT team has arrived and starts to saw the door open, but they cut right through a tripwire that activates a motorized winch. The father is suddenly pulled back into the air by the strings attached to his body, and as the SWAT team bursts into the room, everything goes horribly wrong. They point their guns at the man, and Zeke comes running out trying to explain, but suddenly a gun flies down out of the trap and into the father's hands. His arm is lifted up by the strings, pointing it straight at the SWAT team, and they brutally gun the man down. That's now 5 dead, and Zeke realizes he's failed to save every single victim from their death trap. There's nothing he can do, and the new Jigsaw Killer escapes before anyone can stop Chris Rock from pitching a sequel. But what do you think? How would you beat Spiral? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, leave a like and subscribe, and check out the How to Beat playlist for more videos like this. Until next time, have a damn good day.
On Disney Magic Bake Off, it's 2 very special guests. You've seen their sweet and super cool cake recipes on your socials.
Welcome to the kitchen.
Now Mia Starr and Rachel Fong are guest judges on a new Disney Magic Bake Off, Fridays at 8 on Disney Channel.
X-Men is unique in comics history. Unlike Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, and most other popular superheroes which were defined by many creators over decades, the X-Men's wild success is due almost entirely to one writer, Chris Claremont.
I was born in London, abducted by pirates at a young age, transported across the pond to this strange new world. My father wanted to explore medicine over here. My mother wanted better food. It was 5 years after the war. She was tired of rationing. Went to school for the first time. dressed as I would be going to school back home. Shorts and a proper shirt and a proper sleeveless sweater and knee socks and shoes and a blazer. And didn't last the day. And never did it again.
Chris grew up in a military family, and they moved around quite a bit.
When you're moving every couple of years, by the time you settle in and establish relationships, especially when you're a kid, boom, you're up and out, moving across the country, and you got to do it all over again. That's a hard thing to get used to. And after a while, you just stop trusting. Because, well, I'm not going to make friends, because if I make friends, we'll just move again.
Chris's experiences feeling like a little bit of an outsider had influence on his work on the X-Men. He probably would not have found a whole lot to identify with in the comics of say, the 50s or maybe even the early 60s.
Comics was something I did when I went to get a haircut. You know, sitting around waiting for a barber. Didn't want to read Ladies' Home Journal. So if there were comics I read comics.
Chris Claremont, when he went to college for theater. He wanted to be an actor. And what do actors do? They sit and they think about character. How do you make a character well-rounded? What is a character's backstory? How do you present it so that it's not a flat, two-dimensional thing on the stage, but is something living and real that the audience can relate to? And I believe that it's that training in how to create a character that led him to create these amazing characters. As a university student, Chris was tasked with finding an internship, a task which took him into the world of comics.
My parents had a friend, Al Jaffe, the artist for Mad Magazine, and I thought it'd be cool to work as a volunteer for Mad, because from all accounts, Mad was cool. Al evidently called up my parents and said, "There's no way in hell I'm going to take your son into the office. Do you have any idea what we do in there? Or you'll never speak to me again." But Al said, "I know Stan Lee. If he's interested, I can see about getting him a job at Marvel." I said, "Cool." And the minute I said, since it's school, I'll work for free, I was in.
While Marvel comics of the 60s may seem dated now, at the time they were hailed for a realism and relatability previously unseen in comics.
The challenges that the Marvel heroes would come across were more down to earth. And because they were more down to earth, they made the superheroics part of things a little more accessible. It wasn't that Spidey would defeat Doc Ock. It was, will he get the test in on time? Will he work things out with Gwen Stacy? Everybody was flawed, which made the Marvel characters that much more accessible and interesting from a dramatic side of things, and more fun to play with. And as far as the X-Men were concerned, no one really knew from one issue to the next, were they respectable, were they hated, were they loved, were they what? They'd save the world and nobody'd say thank you.
X-Men was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby in 1963. They introduced the basic premise of mutants fighting for a world that hates and fears them, and some of the series' notable characters. But the book was not considered a major achievement next to more successful Marvel titles like Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, or The Avengers.
It was one of the very few books Jack and Stan created that wasn't at least doing solidly in the marketplace. They left the book early.
The X-Men back in the 60s was a commercial failure, ultimately. It got canceled. But it was always a book that had loyal readers. It was always an intelligent book, even though it was sort of a second, even third string book.
And there was talk for a number of years about possibly reviving the book as a group of international heroes based on the fact that a lot of Marvel books sold very well in various other foreign countries, and they thought if they could get heroes from those countries in this book, it would increase the sales even more.
Editor Len Wein and artist Dave Cockrum were tasked with creating an all-new, all-different team of international X-Men.
Dave Cockrum was already a fan favorite from his work on Legion of Superheroes.
And he showed me his sketchbooks from the Navy.
costume design, he'd come in with 40 pages of artwork.
So it's where we found Nightcrawler and Colossus, a Thunderbird, all came from that.
Giant Size X-Men #1 was released in May 1975, the first new X-Men story in 5 years. It was successful enough to justify continuing the series.
It was supposed to be a quarterly because Marvel wasn't sure it would sell. After Dave had started working on the second issue, the editorial decision came down to make the book a bi-monthly.
And X-Men, I really didn't intend to give up initially.
But he didn't have time to do a bi-monthly X-Men.
And when I said, gee, I don't know, should I give up the X-Men, should I keep it? Chris just sort of sat there going, I'll take it, me over here.
So he asked if I was interested. And I said, hell yes.
In his early issues, Claremont began to develop this new cast of characters and started laying the groundwork for decades of storylines.
What I had was what almost no one has had since then, a mainstream series that was fundamentally a tabula rasa. We had a half dozen characters, all of whom were brand new. It was a chance to get in on the sub-level and define the characters from the get-go.
His dialogue had more sophistication to it than a lot of other writers. It had more of an edge. He also was delving more deeply into character in ways that a lot of other comics writers of the time were not doing.
You take these 7 people, 5 of whom were immigrants, and you throw them into a world that ideally is unlike anything they know. You had a wall down the middle of Europe. So for Peter Rasputin to come from the Us-Gordinsky Collective to New York to work with the X-Men was making a valid and, in its own small way, revolutionary statement.
Chris and Dave Cochran and later John Byrne were the ones who really sort of helped define these characters.
How do we define Nightcrawler? Nightcrawler should be scary, but no. We're tired of demons who look like demons, acting like demons. Why can't they be cool? Why can't they be normal people? Why don't we make the most outrageous looking of the team the most cheerfully rational and generous of them all?
Wolverine came along when I was doing the Hulk. The idea of making him a mutant was simply because I knew there was talk of someday doing this international book. I said, well, okay, so I'll give him a Canadian hero.
Len had envisioned him as a kid. He was 19, 20 years old, and that the claws were part of the costume, not the body. And the problem is, he didn't look like a kid. And especially in the first issue, he's presented as an officer. So we figured, let's go the other direction. Why not try him as being older? But then if he's older, and he's got a healing factor, how old are we talking about? And then the third thing was, well, wouldn't it be cool if the claws actually came out of his body? If they were a part of him? And the first reaction was, oh, that's disgusting. Oh man, that's creepy. Oh, they are gonna love this. The reality for me from the very beginning was every time he pops his claws, he is slashing open his hand. So there's blood and there's pain. To me, that made him accessible and human. He wasn't just a magic monster. He's a guy who has a serious problem, and he can't escape from it. And so how do we deal with it?
At the time, Chris's boss at Marvel was Jim Shooter, who had broken into the comics industry as a writer as a young teenager.
I'm Jim Shooter, and when I was 12 years old, I decided I wanted to write comic books because my family needed money, and when you're 12, they won't hire you in a steel mill. So I thought, I can do that. The reason I thought I could do it is I read a bunch of DC comics, I read a bunch of Marvel comics, and the Marvel comics were better. And I thought, if I can figure out why these are better, then I can write for those guys. So I literally studied comic books for a year. And when I thought I had it figured out, I wrote a script for DC Comics, Adventure Comics, featuring Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes. And sent it to them. I thought, well, maybe I have a shot of selling this. Well, I got a letter back from the editor saying, hey, this is pretty good, send us another one. So I sent him 2 more. He called me up and he said, I want to buy all 3 of these and I want you to write a superhero story and we'll keep you busy as much as you want. So I became a regular writer. It was in 9th grade.
This was not a common thing. A 13 and 14-year-old kid writing comics just didn't happen in 1966.
After this went on for a little while, the editor said, I want you to fly up to New York. I lived in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I want you to fly up to New York and spend a couple days in the office because we want to teach you a few things. And I kind of hesitated. And he finally said, how old are you? Because he thought I must be a college student, I think. And I said, well, I just turned 14. I wrote the first story when I was 13. And he said, put your mother on the phone.
He always wanted to work for Marvel. Marvel was where the quality stuff was. So he moved over to Marvel and began as an editor. And this was a time after Stan Lee had stopped being the editor of the comics where Marvel went through about 4 or 5 editors-in-chief in about 4 or 5 years.
Basically, it was anarchy. I mean, basically every writer just kind of did his own thing. The books were never even seen by the office until they're completed. I was kind of brought in as an innovation, an editor, someone to actually look at the plots, make sure that they made sense, look at the pencils when they came in, make sure they followed the plot, and then look at the script when it came in and made sure that makes sense, so that there would be fewer catastrophes at the end that had to be entirely remade.
The pressure of a monthly schedule forced original artist Dave Cockrum to leave the book. He was replaced by John Byrne, an up-and-coming young artist whose collaborations with Chris drew more critical acclaim and attention to X-Men.
Now that we're so used to the X-Men being the hit, the #1, it may be hard to realize that at one point that it was the sort of the book that the aficionados knew and loved.
When I met Chris, I discovered he was pretty intense. I mean, he cared desperately about this 3rd-string book, and he poured his heart into it. And I read it, I thought it was pretty good.
Those people who, shall we say, had discerning taste knew that this was good, this was something different, this was a book that was going places. But it wasn't until into the 80s that the book really became this top seller.
One of Claremont's most successful early stories was the Phoenix Saga, which saw ordinary mutant Jean Grey transformed into a cosmically powerful entity, the Phoenix.
He had this idea that maybe, like, Phoenix could, like, her powers could run amok a little bit and stuff. And I said, you know what? At Marvel Comics, we had any number of villainous characters become heroic. We've never had a heroic character become evil. I mean, really evil. The next Doctor Doom, you know? And I said, why don't you do that?
The Dark Phoenix Saga, of course, really nailed it down as the comic that everyone was talking about.
The Dark Phoenix Saga saw Jean seduced by manipulative villain Mastermind until her powers ran amok, leading her to consume a planet filled with an alien race known as asparagus people.
Chris comes in and he shows me this page and he says, look, this is Phoenix. And he said, John drew her and she's destroying a planet. So then I wrote this caption and it said, you know, the asparagus people scream, there's zillions of them fry. And I said, Chris, she's a hero. You can't have her kill all these people. And he said, oh yeah, Shooter said I could. You had shown it.
No, Salicrup said I could.
And that's right. And Mommy said I could. That's right. And then you're bringing it
John and I thought Salicrup had shown it to Shooter, and it turned out, no, he hadn't.
When I became editor-in-chief, I would check the books out. I mean, no book would go to the printer without my signature. I remember checking out an issue of X-Men. I think, mass murder, holy cow. And so I'm reading through these scripts and plots, and finally the plot for the last issue. And in the plot for the last issue, Dark Phoenix is captured by the Shi'ar, and she gets her brain adjusted, and then she's okay again, and she goes back and lives on Long Island with the X-Men, and everything's fine. I said, whoa, what a wimpy ending. Nah. I said, you got to do something better. He said, like what? So we had another one of our shouting arguments. And I suggested, I said, well, maybe, for the first time in comic book history, she gets captured and sent to prison.
But then you automatically know that the next 40 issues of X-Men will be them trying to get to hell, breaking her out, failing, succeeding.
So he didn't like that. I said, well, then you figure it out. Okay, you're the writer. You do it. So the next morning he came in, and he kind of strides into my office. He said, we're going to kill her.
well, I figured if we're going to do it, we might as well do it right.
I said, okay, she's dead. It's done. It's a deal. It's a pact. She dies. And he's like, what do you mean? Now he starts arguing like, you can't kill her. I said, what do you mean, me kill her? You just said you were going to kill her. So Chris goes out of my office, finds a phone someplace. Seconds later, my phone rings. It's John Byrne. And his first words were, are you crazy? And I said, no, we're killing her. That's it. So they're both yelling at me now. It was a bluff. They didn't really want to kill her. They did it sort of kicking and screaming. And yet that issue sold sold through the roof. And P.S., it's a great issue.
The impact was huge. X-Men sales went through the roof. People reportedly sent flowers and death threats to the Marvel offices. It was the major sensational event of its day and really put the X-Men on the map sales-wise and critical-wise, and it sort of stayed there for the next 20, 25 years.
That same year, I flew the whole X-Men team out to San Diego, and that wasn't done in those days. They were mobbed everywhere they went. Mobbed.
It was an era in which the creators were becoming more prominent, were becoming stars, and that this was Chris Claremont's X-Men.
I'm Louise Simonson, otherwise known as Wheezy, and I started Marvel in 1980 as an editor.
Toward the end of the Dark Phoenix saga, the X-Men got a new editor, Louise Simonson.
Like all children in the 50s, I read some comics.
Louise Simonson, who used to be known as Louise Jones, was around comics for a really long time.
I wanted to be in publishing of some kind. I knew that. That was why I was in New York. I knew comics. I knew a lot of people who worked in comics.
And if you go back to the very first Swamp Thing comic in 1972, she was the model for the cover that Bernie Wrightson drew.
I didn't think of it as a career until I actually started working there, and I found I loved it. Loved the people, loved the work.
Shortly after joining Marvel, Louise Simonson was assigned to edit Chris Claremont and John Byrne on X-Men.
Because I had been asked to edit the X-Men, I took home all of Chris's work from the very beginning when he had started writing the X-Men. I sat down, I had a raging headache. The building behind me was throwing a huge party. There was a loud band, womp, 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 and my head was going womp, womp, womp. And I started reading these comics, and it all went away. And I was in the world of the X-Men, and it was wonderful. And I thought, has any other editor ever been so lucky as to be handed a team like this and a book like this? I was very, very lucky, and I realized it. With Chris, it was never a problem coming up with a story. Chris is an enormous font of ideas.
And I would just sit there at lunch watching how she negotiated which ideas were good and which weren't good.
I remember there was one issue. Chris had gotten really late. Shooter was threatening to pull him off that issue and put in a villain. So I dragged him to my house, and I sat him down in a chair, and I said, okay, Chris, what happens? And he'd tell me, blah, 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 blah. And I'd go, shh. Okay, what happens next? And he'd say, blah, blah, blah. And I'd go, what happens next? And I'd type it up.
And they used to call Wheezy that her superpower was the power to cloud men's minds. And all I had to do was watch her handle Chris for a while, where she somehow would pull the best ideas out, and everybody left the office with their tail wagging. And then I'd sit there and go, did they realize that you just told them what they were doing was terrible and they had to redo it? They always left happy.
And Wheezy would just smile and say,
I think that's a legend.
It's not, I've witnessed it.
And the thing is, we know she's doing it when it's happening. It's like, wow, I'm really brilliant.
Yeah.
Well,
she's smarter.
I don't really notice that I'm being whipped right now. You know, it feels good actually.
Though many today consider Dark Phoenix the high point of Chris's run, he was just getting started developing a universe of characters.
Well, we just killed off Phoenix, and the idea that I think John and I were always playing with during our run on the book was, okay, can you top this? Just when you thought you could take a breath and relax, we have this wacky idea.
Days of Future Past was a story that looked into the future of the X-Men.
You come in the last act of a tragedy, where the first cover says it all. Look at that wanted poster behind Logan and Kitty, and there are all the X-Men, and half of them say dead. And you know, just looking at it, that everybody there who is a mutant is living on borrowed time. And yes, the paradigm for Days of Future Past comes right out of the Second World War and what happened in Germany. And that is the automatic primal resonance for Magneto. This is his worst nightmare come to pass. This is everything he has warned against and fought against for his entire life. How can he find a way to stop it, to neutralize it, to make it right? And then the other side of the coin is Xavier has to look at it and think, everything Magneto has told me has come to pass. Which side should I be on? The neat tagline for Days of Future Past was that you don't know what will happen tomorrow. You just have to do everything you can today to make the world and life in the world as good as possible.
Several issues after Days of Future Past, John Byrne quits because he wants to go over and do Fantastic Four. And I think, oh my God, I'm doomed. I have driven this brilliant creative team apart. Oh no, they're going to fire me for sure. But then, but Chris kept it together, bless his sweetheart. And, the rest is history. It just got better and better and better.
After turning a hero into a villain with Phoenix, he set out to redeem the X-Men's arch-nemesis, Magneto.
Magneto was sort of the typical Marvel villain, very much in the mode of Doctor Doom.
In the Scottish play, Mac-You-Know-Who comes out and he's just a bastard from step one. Who cares? But if you see that he starts out as a noble hero, a trusted knight, and suddenly he's walking down a path which makes perfect sense to him, but you're watching the degradation, the corruption, the destruction of someone who could have been a noble hero. It's the essence of great tragedy. The villain, the guy who turns out to be the monster, has to have something wonderful to lose.
You started to get this really intense backstory.
So with Magneto, what led him to this position? He's a young man in Auschwitz. He lost everything there. He survived. Somehow he survived. And each step of the way leads him towards putting on the suit and forming the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants and coming out and trying to say, I've tried playing by your rules. It isn't working. Fine. I'm going to impose my rules and you'll behave yourselves. I'm going to be the dad now and not the servitor.
This was a really bold way to reimagine a villain. It gave the character a depth that very few bad guys in superhero comics ever had.
Issue number 150 revealed Magneto's Holocaust backstory and also put him in contact with Kitty Pryde, a recently introduced teenage X-Men.
The beautiful paradigm of Kitty's presence in the X-Men was suddenly we had a young Jewish hero who is everything Magneto is fighting for. And the seminal moment in 50 is he damn near kills her. Not because he has anything against her, it's just he reacted. He saw the costume, she was attacking him, he struck back, and then realized, oh my God, it's a little girl. But within the context of the character that I was building, this is also a man who 20 years earlier had seen his own daughter, the same age, burned to death because she was different. And that was bringing home in a primal sense, a personal sense, I am becoming that which I fought my entire life. Am I a good man who can reform himself through will? Or am I inevitably a monster? I mean, my plan was by 300 to have Charlie killed and Magneto become the permanent head of the school. No, I wanted him to be a hero. I wanted him to be the leader of the X-Men, because it would then allow us the opportunity of creating a whole new, utterly irredeemable villain for the current generation.
The X-Men in particular really appeals to people who feel in some way marginalized, because they've always been this metaphor for outsiders.
If you don't fit in anyplace else, then you know that there are other people like you.
Now, that's a great metaphor for race and racism, but I think it's not a bad metaphor for what women also have to endure.
And it had more female characters. It had such a diverse cast.
Much more independent, much more feminist than we've seen before.
Every team had a female character who was the girl. Never the woman, always the girl. I figured, why can't we have more exciting people?
He has said that whenever he sat down to create a character, he would always say first, is there any reason that this character can't be female?
So he added so many female characters to the mutant canon. Kitty Pryde was the classic inquisitive young girl. She was spunky. She was learning about love for the first time. She was exploring her powers. She was just the perfect character for teenage girls to identify with.
I felt like Kitty Pryde. There was my role model now.
And there was Storm, who is really probably my first feminist icon ever. Because I'm mixed. It was one of the first comic book characters where it was a strong female character in Storm.
I don't think other people asked, why can't this character be a woman? I think it was a Chris thing. And honestly, I think that because it was a Chris thing, Chris's books were very popular with a female audience. And you got to figure that half the people out there in the world are female. So, it could have been one of the reasons that his books sold so well. I mean, the X-Men was a huge seller.
Ann Nocenti came on first as an assistant editor under Louise Simonson, and then she took over as editor of the book.
I'm Annie Nocenti. Actually, I'm Ann Nocenti. Who am I? I didn't have a history of reading comics. I didn't even know what a comic was when I got hired. I answered an ad in the Village Voice, and it said that they were looking for writers. I called up and I said, well, what would I be writing? And she said, oh, well, I can't say over the phone. And I thought, well, porn. Okay, I'll try.
The advantage, I think, that I've had with X-Men was Louise Simonson and Ann Nocenti as editors. They provided a perspective that was rarely available elsewhere.
So he had women around him, women who he respected.
Anne had no idea where I was coming from, and I had no idea where she was coming from, so we shuffled it all together and came up with some really great stuff. And Weezy would just look at us and kind of go, gosh, aren't they interesting?
The offices themselves back then were a lot of fun.
When I first came into Marvel, there were people sleeping under desks. There was a giant papier-mâché figure of Thor suspended from the ceiling. I mean, DC was like an insurance office. Marvel was, I said, home.
Or they would decide to set up offices in the bathroom, or people would come in with balloons, helium balloons, with their thoughts over their heads, and it was really fun.
There was so much creativity that it just boiled over.
Yeah.
It wasn't contained. It boiled over onto the walls. It spilled out into the bullpen.
We're sitting around one day, and we were talking about Saturday Night Live, because they were just in their second season, and it was really cool. And, what are we going to do in Team Up? Oh, shit, what would be fun? Why don't we just Spidey and the Not Ready for Primetime Players? And Shooter looks at me and says, well, listen, well what? Well, it's your idea, do it. You can't, can't. Okay. And so he called him up, and it's like, Jim talks for 5 minutes, and that was all it took. And we all got invited to the cast party for Animal House.
Marvel was considered to be a creative think tank back then. And Nassau once said, we're sending slinkies into space.
Oh, NASA,
And
yeah.
we want the slinkies to have superhero characters. So they'd hire us, and we would come up with characters for NASA. And then the Vatican hired us to do the Pope comic. You remember that?
Oh, God,
And
yes.
the Monsignors came through and blessed all the pages, and we were just dying. You know?
Because half of us were Jewish. And the other half you don't want to know.
Huh?
Marvel was the kind of wild, crazy place where this sort of silliness happened as a matter of course.
With X-Men a bigger and bigger success, Marvel wanted to expand the brand, and corporate higher-ups pushed for a spin-off title.
Jim Shooter had been after the X-Men office, which was me and Chris essentially, to create another X book for a while. Chris didn't want to do that because he didn't want to water down the impact of the X-Men. I mean, he felt like he was doing it, he was doing it well, and that there was, really you didn't need another book. But commercially, Shooter wanted another success that was as big as the X-Men if he could manage it.
As soon as Chris realized that this was actually, I think, going to happen, was when he sort of got serious about, okay, well, if there's going to be a spin-off, I'm going to do it. Because he was protective of his corner of Marvel.
Chris developed the New Mutants, which introduced a new cast of teenage characters studying at Xavier Academy.
After a little slightly rocky start, that became a real interesting book. I mean, that became our experimental book with Bill Sienkiewicz doing fantastic, weird, crazy, artsy stuff.
The energy that built when we decided to put Bill Sienkiewicz on the New Mutants was extraordinary. That was just extraordinary because Bill is so deeply intelligent. He's so passionate. He has a billion ideas.
You had stuff that looked like it was drawn by little kids, in crayon, and then you had stuff that just looked like beautiful Renaissance painting.
This looked cutting edge, and I think Chris responded to that by making the stories more cutting edge.
I don't think we would have done the stories we did with Warlock, for instance, without Bill as the artist, because we knew that Bill would just run with it.
The whole tone of the New Mutants comic took a big shift from more teenage storylines into things that were a lot deeper and a lot more complicated and emotional. And Legion was probably the best example of this because it delves into so much psychology.
So I used to say, Bill, draw whatever you want. You're a genius. Why should I tell you what to draw? And he'd do these covers that were, to me, they were like brilliant. And Shooter would fight him
tooth and nail.
Chris had to run everything past his editor, of course. The editor had to say yes or no.
Well, there are always clashes between writers and editors because you have different perspectives. The writer is very tunnel vision. I want what is best for my book. Everybody else get the hell out of the way. The editor-in-chief, like it or not, has to balance those desires with the fact that you're playing in a community.
Well, we fought like cats and dogs, me and him. He wanted to do all kinds of things, and X-Men was important. I paid attention to it.
But for the most part, I think that Chris had a surprising amount of creative freedom.
We could do whatever we wanted, really.
We just had to be a little tactful about it, that's all.
Chris, Weezy, and I came up with storylines. There was nobody guarding the gate between us and the public. Sometimes your mistakes saw print, but so what? Because you were always able to stretch and do fun things.
Shooter was the only real major obstacle, and really he wasn't that bad.
Yeah, you could
certainly on the X-Men he wasn't that bad.
Oh, no.
He had his moments, but
I tried never to say you must do this, but I would say this is the sort of thing we need because you created this story and it needs to go someplace. And so we'd have these shouting matches. But it was always about the story.
When Shooter would get us all presents?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
oh, yes.
Some of those presents were just like...
Well, when he got me a bondage outfit.
I know.
With a whip and a knife.
Claremont's run continued with artist Paul Smith and a series of stories that drove deeper into the personal and emotional lives of the characters.
It's interesting. I hear people talking about a character now, and it's as if they're over there, and they're iconic, and they're, they were just people.
You define certain specified moments. We're going in this direction. But these are organic characters, and it's not just a single character. You're dealing with a group of 7 to 14 characters in an issue. You don't know who will suddenly jump to the foreground.
One of the maddening but beautiful things about comics is that you have to give characters a sense of change without changing them so much that they violate the essence of who they are.
Dave, when we started, emphasized Nightcrawler because he loved Nightcrawler. He bonded with Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler to him was the coolest thing since sliced bread. John Byrne loved Logan, and that shifted the evolution in a slightly different direction. Smitty, I like to think that the character who stepped to the foreground was Storm.
Under Chris and Paul Smith, Storm had a personal crisis, lost her powers, and took on a new mohawk and leather look.
You know, I think one of the best things Chris came up with Storm was deciding that the goddess thing was getting a little tired and to put her in the biker outfit. Characters age and get stuck. The whole African worship thing started to feel a little like clunky and tacky, and and just right at the right time you have to recreate a character, but they have to stay the same.
And with Smitty, the superhero adventures, they're all right, but the character, the characterization, the interaction of the X-Men on an emotional level was unsurpassed. One image that stays to mind is the moment where Rogue walks into the room in Japan to meet Logan and Mariko, and she's just standing there shyly. It's very, very, very hard to draw shy. And Paul did it. At that point, you don't need a superhero battle. You don't need the end of the universe. You bond with that girl, and you want to know, how do you make her feel better?
You write from your heart, and you write your passions, what interests you, and then there's going to be a ton of people out there that are going to react.
The X-Men expressed real emotion, sorrow, anger, love, lust. Their lives were just so turbulent. When people call the X-Men a soap opera, it's not really a joke, and I was totally enthralled.
And once I started reading X-Men, I was obsessed with comics. X-Men comics were where it started for me. Got super into that.
It's really easy to think that you write these stories, they're just disposable. They don't go into anybody's head. But you get letters occasionally from people that your stories really made a difference to. It makes me feel better about what I do, which is entertainment. You begin to think, entertaining people is maybe not so unimportant after all.
If I'd never opened that X-Men comic, I don't know if I would be exactly where I am today, because this is what I want to do.
Chris continued to expand and deepen his universe with new artist John Romita Jr., but was rudely surprised by the news that a new X-Men book would be starting without him, X-Factor, and that the first issue would resurrect Jean Grey.
X-Factor sprung from an idea that they had to reunite the original X-Men, because Chris constantly added characters to the X-Men, and you ended up with a pool of X-Men characters that weren't in the X-Men, and obviously Marvel was going to think that's a good idea to maybe do something with them since X-Men sells so well.
Chris had been told that if Jean was killed, she would never, ever, ever come back. This was the end. She was dead, 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 forever, ever, ever. And that was fine.
Oddly enough, even though it was Jim Shooter who was the one who decreed that Jean Grey must die for the Dark Phoenix saga, of course, he was one of the principal forces behind X-Factor, which brings Jean back.
So my idea is that when you kill a character, that character stays dead. And my idea with Phoenix was that she would remain dead. Well, it was John Byrne who came up with this Return of Phoenix idea.
The first thing she tells me is, well, there's something you need to know. What's that? They're bringing back Jean. And I said, what the? And I jumped up from the table, ran out the door, and called Shooter, who had the sense not to be in the office. It was after hours. I couldn't go back and punch him.
Before this, you called me and asked, and I said, oh, Shooter would never do that.
That's what
he
we thought.
Swore to you. Yeah. So I gave you really bad advice. I mean, I calmed him down. Because I wasn't an editor at that time. I was just a freelancer. Shooter would never, ever do that. He wouldn't lie to you that way, I said. He's an honorable man.
Yeah.
Guess what?
if you have 400,000 readers who read this issue and have emotional reactions to the death of a character, and then we turn around and say, we lied, they're never going to trust you again.
X Factor was a critical dud, and original writer Bob Layton was soon replaced by Louise Simonson. She worked closely with Chris and brought the book more in line with his vision for X-Men. At the same time, Chris became known for an increasingly sprawling narrative style, with plot threads stretching multiple issues and even years before resolution.
Problem I always had with Chris on the book, and I loved his work, I read the book religiously while he was writing it, was he was always starting new stories.
And we were getting fast and loose and sloppy and having stories that went on for 6 issues, and we didn't know
Not
how
at all
to...
like today.
It was like The Big Sleep, you know, where not even, was it Raymond Chandler? Not even Raymond Chandler knew what was going on or how it ended, or that was kind of what we were up to.
Once in a while, he would say, I've run out of ideas. I can't think of a story. Oh, my God. But with Chris, it was easy because, as we all know, Chris had loads of dangling plot threads that the readers, of course, always carried on about. So you'd say, well, Chris, you have this plot thread and this plot thread and this plot thread. Any of those one you want to pick up? And he'd say, oh, okay. And he'd go home and write a story, and it would be great.
You basically root around in a box, either on the floor or in your head, looking for something that catches your imagination, and you just start talking about it, and the next thing you know, you're stitching it into a story.
And then, of course, it all comes from character. Once you learn who these characters are, it becomes just innate. You know what Logan would do and wouldn't do. They're speaking to you, the characters. The only way you could do this day in and day out was to convince yourself these characters were real. So we had a lot of affection for them. So we would have conversations like, who's Kitty going to play with? Which sounds retarded.
But it was a reality of life. I mean, this is...
Or even who has
to go there. It's just,
This period was notable for Chris taking time out for low-key personal stories like Life Death, in which Storm and mutant inventor Forge share an intimate dinner.
We had done a bunch of epic stories and made a conscious decision to slow the pace down and just do a Storm story. And not even a Storm story, or a Roro story.
I mean, we had a 5-page scene of Storm just sitting there drinking wine and wearing a pair of jeans and fixing a salad.
And that was just so much fun. To just allow ourselves to have that little breather, that one moment when we were just like, well, who is she? People have this wonderful pause, and then, boom, you hit them with something.
And it gives you something to have your big story about, other than about explosions, which I personally happen to love. I have no problem with blowing things up and knocking buildings over. But it's nice to have it have a human context. And if you've got characters whom you've come to love involved in this event, then the event has meaning. And if you threaten these characters, it means a lot more than if it's just one explosion after another with no emotional context.
I also think that when you have like a lot of characters in a book, you have to take turns torturing them. Chris loved torturing Wolverine, Storm. It is interesting that we use this word torture a lot. We're always talking about torturing the characters. It's meant with a lot of affection.
Oh, total love.
It's kind of like if you want to find out what somebody is made of, put them through some kind of trial.
Yeah. It's our answer to why God allows evil in the universe.
Well, because otherwise he'd be boring. It's like there's no fun in the world if I don't have the devil.
I don't know if you've noticed from the three of us, but when you write comics for years, you stay a little infantile. It keeps you very infantile.
Young and all but hair.
As the X-Men started to get more popular, there were pressures to make more and more titles that involved those X-Men characters. And Claremont, of course, who felt very proprietary about these characters.
The advantage that X-Men built is that it was fundamentally the product of two people, two writers, me and Wheezy. That gave it a tremendous focus in terms of what we could do with the characters and how they were presented to the audience.
What you start to see in the early 1980s is Chris Claremont spreading himself thinner and thinner, making sure that he can keep controlling what's going on with these corporate-owned properties. They're going to be published with or without him. And so he's just trying to make it as good as he can.
The first 3 or 4 years being off the radar, we had our time to ourselves.